Yes, I haven't read about it in Duluth, but we were up in about 5 years ago. We were in Ray when there was a big fire in the house, and we had a night at 6 o'clock. It's absolutely dark, and then the sky turned yellow and it started falling. And we had a pair of masks in our couch, and it was like 95. Yeah. I was up in Duluth yesterday for like 2 hours. I drove up at 6:30 and left at 11. So. Well, I bet she can find her way back. You never know. You never know. She might get lost in the ice cream or wherever. Yeah. Not the same. The same. It will only refer to me. We are. We're going. We got our mic. We'll make a lot of noise.
I just started off with the little piano.
Yeah, that was your job. Didn't you practice? You heard that right note.
Yeah, I forgot to learn how.
Well, I think we're almost ready to start. So. Well, I think
Kind of a rough crowd.
it is a rough crowd. It came with big books. It's impressive.
Don't have sticks.
Well, I'll stay away.
Okay.
I'd like to not get hit.
Yeah, let's see one.
The lost is found. Hello, hello.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this next Justice Wednesday event. I know we all have secret passions, gifts and skills that a lot of people don't know about. I bumped into Hillary in the hallway, I don't know, maybe a month ago, and she was telling me about her research transcribing Civil War letters. And so we've invited Carol and Hillary to come as our secret researchers in residence. And they're going to share a little bit to us about their research in transcribing Civil War letters of the Minnesota 2nd Regiment. And I'll just turn it over to you all. We've asked them to present for about a half an hour, and then we'll do like we do with most of our programs. I'll come around with the microphone if you have comments or questions. I've had a number of residents ask because they couldn't make it today. So we are recording it today. So if you have a neighbor who didn't get to see it, it will be on the CSJ YouTube channel, or if you need the direct link to it, just talk to me afterwards. But Carol and Hillary, welcome, and we're looking forward to hearing about your research.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I'm Carol. She's Hillary, in case you didn't get that figured out. We're so glad you're here, and would like to just do a little bit of an introduction to how we got into this business. When we talk about transcribing Civil War letters, what does that mean? Well, there are some copies around, and all of those letters were written in longhand, some of which are quite easily deciphered. Others are more exciting, and then you have to kind of figure out what was it they were saying. So what we have done is gone through, how many hours have we done this?
Oh, 4 years, over 400 hours.
Yeah, of reading these letters, transcribing them, putting them down into a computer so that they can then be uploaded to the Stones River National Battlefield website. And I go through that name very clearly because that's where we have spent most of our time volunteering. And that's where these letters are all from the archives of Stones River National Battlefield. Okay, so test question. Where is Stones River National Battlefield? Nobody needs to answer, but I will tell you. If you go to Nashville, Tennessee, and turn sort of southeast, I think that's right, and go about 30 more miles, you'll get to the small town, medium-sized town of Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And the park sits inside that town. It's not a well-known battlefield, but it's a very important battlefield. I mean, did any of you hear about Stones River National Battlefield in your history classes? No. If you're like me, what you learned was Abraham Lincoln was the president in 1861. He led the Union side in this, quote, rebellion, I'm using the words from history, against the Union, starting in 1861 for a 4 years war. That's how long this thing lasted. Nobody thought it was going to go that long. Everybody figured it'd be just a little bit rebellion and then they could take care of it and it would be over. That was not the right answer. So what we have to share with you this morning is some of the letters and diaries that were sent by soldiers. Now, these are soldiers, foot soldiers. There are a few from generals or more important, higher up guys, but not so much. Mostly these are letters that were sent to wives, sisters, parents, and they are not all fun. So some of the letters you hear may offend you. And for that, it's part of the way this business got done. I wanted to just let you know that when this battle at Stones River, there was a 3-day battle, December 28, 29 into January 1st and 2nd of 1863, 62, 63. When that battle was over, the Union troops had won after a series of disastrous losses. But that victory enabled President Lincoln to issue the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed the slaves in the southern states under slavery. A sidebar, there were 4 northern states that had slaves and they were not freed. That's another whole story that we're not going to get into today.
What were those states, Carol?
Oh, did you want to know that, Hillary?
They might.
I could even tell you because I wrote it down. It is
Delaware?
She's gonna find it. Delaware, Kentucky, Missouri,
And Maryland.
and Maryland. Those 4 states. And when that Emancipation Proclamation got signed, those slaves were still slaves. So what we have done since a long time ago have been volunteering at Stones River National Battlefield. If you've never been there, it's a long jaunt, but it's a good trip. The stories are fantastic. We volunteered there in visitor service, but then there was a pandemic that hit and the park was closed. So what we got were emails from park staff of all of these primary resources. So we have been working off these primary resources for
4 years.
4 years, transcribing them, and they're all going back down to the website for the park.
So what we're going to do is, there were themes that came out that we were surprised about, because one of the things you have heard, depending on where you lived, was that this was about slavery. It was not about slavery. It was about the Constitution. And it was very, very clear. And so we're going to share some of those letters about the Constitution. there was a very strong bias against Blacks. And I'm going to share a little bit about that. And one of the questions, which I think is a justice question, is the destruction, intentional destruction of the South. And I'm going to read some of that because we weren't taught that. There was a battle, the Stones River battle was only second in number of killed, wounded to Gettysburg. So it was a large battle. And that the destruction of the South, there was a battle later at Corinth, Mississippi, which is right at the top of Mississippi, right on the Tennessee border. And in that, the war shifted. The war shifted from winning battles to destroying the will of the people, which meant you destroyed their cultural institutions, you destroyed the schools, you destroyed the hospitals, you destroyed their livelihood. It was to crush the will of the people. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because I don't know about you, but I, as a white Northerner, do not think about that very much. And think about the American role in the destruction of the Native American with the bison, the boarding schools. We did something much in kind, but a different degree with those in the South. And what are the ramifications today? So enough. Let me read you a letter. I have to stand because it goes better for me. This was someone who was writing in April 2nd. We had lots of his letters. This is letter number 72. One of the things that was hard is that we'd get involved with some of them and then they'd die and we'd see their notification for death. But this is, he was from Minnesota. Some of ours aren't all from Minnesota. There were Confederate letters. We don't have them with us today, but most of the letters were Union letters. So he begins to write, "My dear beloved wife and children, I will try to write a few lines to you today so as to let you know how I am and what we are about. I am as well today as usual, and I hope that I shall remain so during my term of enlistment or during the war, which I hope will be ended before another winter." This is written in 1863. "For one, I cannot see for the life of me what will hinder the North from putting down every armed traitor in the South before that time, and I have faith to believe it will be done. We're getting a strong army here again, and we are strongly fortified all along the lines. So if the rebel army seems fit to attack us, they will meet with a warm reception. But it's not generally thought they will make an attack. But if they do not, old Rosie was the nickname for General Rosecrans, will go out to see them before a great many weeks roll around. I do not think you'll find many of the boys what will march boldly up to the scratch at the first sound of the bugle, for we are anxious to end this contest and return to our family and friends. But we do not wish to go home before we can do so honorably and have our country at peace. Not till every traitor shall be silenced and put down, never again to show themselves as such. As long as we have a good government as we live under now, although they may do acts under the present circumstances that would be in times of peace deemed unconstitutional. I hope that no one in Minnesota will go against the administration nor any of its acts until the rebellion in the southern states is put down forever. You must not think because a man is a Democrat that he is opposed to the doing of the North and in favor of the South, for there's just as strong supporters of the present administration in the Democratic Party as there is in any other party. In fact, a man cannot be a Democrat unless he's a supporter of the Union. There was something called the Jeffersonian Democrats, and that was a particular form of understanding of a Jefferson a Jeffersonian understanding of government. It was a limited federal government. It really focused on agrarian farmers, civil liberties and freedom. However, it relied on forced labor, AKA slavery. So that if you were a Jeffersonian Democrat, you would probably support the Union. And those who were opposed were called Copperheads. And there was a lot of Copperheads running loose in Preston and other parts of Southwest, Southeast Minnesota. So I will stop with that letter and let Carol read you one more. Yeah.
Okay, this on? I think so. Are you hearing me?
Here, you can use
I'll
mine.
use
I'll
this one.
share.
We learned sharing. We did learn how to share, so we'll do that. This is an obituary that was mailed to a local newspaper and asked to be published. And so I'm going to read a part of it. It's from Pleasant Home, Indiana, the date March 17th, 1863. Mr. Sprode, dear sir, you will confer a favor on many friends by inserting the following notice in your paper. Sergeant William W. Seward was killed instantly on the battlefield in front of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, on the 30th day of December, 1862. The eldest son of Joseph and Charlotte Seward of Madison County, Indiana, young Seward was of course, she can't read, endowed with a warmth, ardent heart, a sweet temper, and a noble, manly bearing, and manifested in no ordinary talent. Public speaking. His power in debate, connected with his surprising turn of mind, had already placed him in advance and above his association. His company was sought by the amiable of both sexes. The superiors in office, as well as fellow soldiers, all concur in giving him full credit for calmness, bravery, and fidelity in all cases, even under that dreadful crossfire in which he fell. Young Seward, I regret to say, was not treated as his moral soul and qualifications, as well as his previous promises, demanded that when they buried him, when the men came by the place, they did what they had to do and covered him over. The young Seward fell far away from home and friends, and while the rich crimson current of the precious life watered the cold ground of his fellow soldiers, without useless coffin to endure his breast, nor in short, nor in shroud, they wound him, but he lay like a warrior taking his rest. Young Seward was 24 years of age last July 30th and was 6 feet 1 inch in height. But he has gone where no battle tread is ever heard, where the ashes of these who have gone before were foes, all now rest in peace. I'm sorry, I can't read it. You go ahead.
I'll read that part. But he often said, and I take pride in recording it, that he went out and bared his breast to the foeman's steel to save the government and not to free the slaves. We will see that refrain often. Think about it when you're looking at writing the language. Many of these people never went beyond high school at all. And the language that, that is used there about that the rich crimson current of his precious life watered the cold ground. Think about that language. Think about the language and how we write now. So I'll hand that back to you. Okay, and then the other piece we wanted to talk about, and I don't mean to offend anyone here, but we saw this language over and over again about how often the Blacks were viewed. I'm going back to our nice guy who I read a little bit about before. He has a daughter. Her name is Alice, and he's writing to Alice. Alice wanted to know, and his wife's name is Neva. We get to know these people. Alice wanted to know if I ever saw so many Negroes as there is in the pictorials. So there were pictorials around. I see more every day, and they look just as bad as any that there is in the papers. Regular darkies from the plantation, of all colors, from the sable black down to the white slaves of the South. Big bucks, wenches, and nigger babies with their thick, curly wool and long heels, thick lips, and wide nose, of every feature natural to the race. But they are to be pitied, for they are a-going. A-going is a common word back then, for they are going to have a hard time of it for a few years at the least. But I hope that African slavery will be ended and the Blacks taken out of this country. This country was made for white men to till and every man to be his own master. But enough of that. And that might be really, really hard to hear, but I think this isn't isolated. If this was an isolated example, I would not have read it to you today. This was a very common feeling about the Blacks in the South. So anyone who says to you, hi, they went to war to free the slaves, you can say, you know, that's interesting. I've heard a different view, and it's about the Constitution. Okay,
To
we have
kind
another
of-
one.
To kind of reinforce that, here is a letter that was sent by one of the soldiers. And he says, I have just come in and am currently alone, but something or another has prompted my mind to write to you. The sun is just setting, and if I do not be as expeditious as possible, dusk will overtake me before I get my letter finished, as is this part of the world, night soon follows sunset. These are exciting times if I can securely compose myself enough to write. Antioch is all in a ferment. Patriotism is blazing high. The new call for troops to attack upon us and capture the Newburgh by rebels has created an excitement, and then the word is unintelligible, which we encounter every now and again when you're reading long print. It's created an excitement. During the beating pipes are squeaking, whistles are screaming, they are hurrying in and to and fro on the sidewalks with a settled condition, but with a settled condition that something must be done, and a determination that something still be done. Our union is at stake. Our country is in peril, and the people of Antioch duly appreciate that fact. The community that was started here but 3 days ago is now almost ready to go into camp at Wabash, about 16 miles west of here. Our government, or rather the heads of government, have just found out that it is time to get in earnest. They began to know that the putting down of this rebellion is no fool's task. Consequently, it is the special duty of every able-bodied man to shoulder arms and rush to the rescue of the country whose privileges he has enjoyed and whose protection he claims. Tell Amanda to send that fellow of hers to the army and let him become a soldier, in other words, or not, if he would idle and fool the time away at home when his country stands in need of his, and he does not deserve to be a countryman of this country and would not fight to defend her should circumstances make it necessary. So Amanda, send him to war if you can, and if you cannot, withdraw your affections. My health is good at present, and the people in general are well. The weather is fine and has been fair quite a number of days. Harvesting is over, but it was a long and tedious job. Several heavy storms before the wheat was ripe enough to harvest caused it in the fall. I have seen hundreds of acres of it as flat as if it had been harvested. It is getting dark, and rather than hunt up a candle, I will bring my letter to a close. Write back when you get this and let me know how you flourish. Yours, George Dousman.
And I think, so we have time for conversation. I will read a couple about the destruction of the country because I think it's important to hear that. One of the letters, the country from above Laverne. So Laverne is in Tennessee, and it's kind of west of Murfreesboro and west central. Thank you. I never know where I'm going, but Carol always directs me. The country from above Laverne to this place is a fenceless, desolate, blood-stained, hoof-trodden burial ground as far as you can see. God forbid the North, too, should ever become the scene of war, the theater of bloodshed. Again, listen to that language. That the North would ever become the scene of war, the theater of bloodshed. I suppose you've learned by this time that J.H. Hopkins and D.B. Guthrie deserted the company the 10th of last month. If you see them, bid them Godspeed, for their sentence was commuted. I tell you, John, old Rosie, remember Rosencrantz, is kind. He rides through the camp, talks to the men as though they do to one another, tells us how to build fire, chop wood, and he was right on the field of battle all the time. If I had time and alone long enough, I would try to give you a connected account of what I know of the whole conflict. But with pen, I will postpone it until a better opportunity offers. But even then, you must remember nobody sees battle. We can tell nothing but a groan, yell, crack of heavy artillery, the report, the roar of cannon and blinding smoke. Some authors have attempted the description of engagement. He has barely succeeded. But no one has ever yet succeeded in the description of the awful pause following the close of battle, nor the field of slaughter under the influence of a half-clouded moon with the hooting of owls breaking the still hours of night. Thank your good stars for having been spared the sight of the heart-rending scene after the fight. That's a pretty descriptive. And I'm going to read you about 4 or 5 more entries. And then this is from a person in the late 1860, 63, 64. He is not in Sherman's army, but they have been marching through the South. And I think I need to read some of these to you. And this is done as a diary. So you can't see this, but this is listing the dates. So they're short entries. Jonesboro has been a pleasant village. but was destroyed by Kilpatrick some days ago. Just at night changed our camp, taking position on the right near us are 3 or 4 rebel hospitals occupied by men wounded in the charges upon the Army of Tennessee the other day. So they came into Jonesboro. It was a really nice town. It wasn't existing after that. They then come into another area. It is under the best cultivation of any farm I have seen at the South. We burned 3 buildings filled with cotton, valued at $100,000. So think about something valued at $100,000 in the 1863s. Harrison, is in Savannah and sent his silverware and silks here for safekeeping. The darkies tell us where they were buried. They were of immense value. As we came through town, we burned all the bridges. Negroes tell us when we get within 4 miles of the city, we'll find high ground in the edge of the swamp. There is a canal covered by their forts. We have batteries planted on the river to prevent their gunboats coming up. The inhabitants must have thought the Yankees could not hunt underground, for they have buried gold, silver, clothing, meal, etc. The Negroes often tell us where to dig to find them, also where to find horses and mules that have been hidden in the swamps. Arrived at Barnwell, quite a beautiful place when we came. When we left, nothing. Went foraging, got the best of everything, and burned 2 cotton gins. Struck the Charleston and Augusta Railroad, 24 miles from Atlanta and 113 from illegible. Our division destroyed 6 miles and then took a northwesterly direction toward Columbia. We were ordered up at midnight to cross the river, the worst time we ever had. Dark as a rebus. Has anyone ever heard that expression before? As a rebus, E-R-B-U-S. With rain and mud, 8 feet, 9.5 inches in depth. By actual measurement, I carried a spade on my shoulder to dig myself and my horse up. Get up again. We're 5.5 hours, only going 2 miles. Not a place to sit down. The hill on each side terrible, and all day helping the trains over, camped 3 miles from the railroad. Okay, couple more. The territory through which we passed on this campaign was more than made desolate. We scarcely left nothing except nigger huts. Supplies were not so plentiful as our campaign through Georgia, this not being so rich a country as that. Bless you. Got a couple more. I think you're getting the sense. Visited the arsenal. It was this is another town. It was very nice with first-class machinery. The machinery was being destroyed and the splendid building battered down. In the evening, the jail was burned, and during night, 1 square of the city was destroyed. Also, the North Carolina Bank, in which General Beard had his headquarters. Okay. Yeah. And visited 5 cotton mills that were destroyed just that night also. I got a few more. You know, what we do is that when we do these letters, sometimes we have to take a break because of the violence that we read. It's a lot. Our division closed up. We went foraging. Sergeant Eddy, who had been in charge of the F detail, was shot, not considerably mortal, although several shots were lodged in his lung. I don't know how that would not be considered mortal, but Dottie and myself got into a tight place, but came out all right, capturing a horse, mule, 2 saddles. At midnight, a detail was sent out to see if they could catch those bushwhackers that shot Eddy. entered the house at break of day and found 3 men, but not the ones they wanted. So they burned the house and outbuildings. The 18th, a sad day in the Army, received official notice of Lincoln's assassination. If our government would veteranize the 105th, veteranize is bring them all back, would veteranize the 105th, which they would not have done any time before, we could declare this a war of extermination. Pretty strong language here. And then I think the last two that I'll read is the 105th and 2nd Minnesota held services together. The text, in case you want to know, was 2 Samuel 3:33, the latter part of the verse, Lincoln's death making it applicable to the occasion. And the last entry was May 1st. We had a gala day, the Stars and Stripes floating in the breeze. This is after the surrender of Lee to Grant at Appomattox. It was said to be the last flag down in the South, and it was then cut down instead of taken down, and now the first to be raised high in the air by the citizens. If it was just left to the breeze as our brigadier, which was in advance, arrived. General Beard ordered us to halt for half an hour and give him some music. The first piece played. Guess what it is? What do you think was the first piece played in the South? This is the North. They've won. The Star-Spangled Banner brought tears to the eyes of many of the fairer sex. So I think that we've spent enough time reading and would really like to have some conversation about, think about the South today. Think about its political leanings. You know, and you say, well, Hillary, you know, this happened a really long time ago, over 150 years ago. But I have to tell you, it's very much alive. And I'll give you 2 examples and then open it for questions. When Carol and I first started at Stones River, Jim Lewis, who's the head of interpretation, he's still there, took us out in his car and pointed to a house and said, that house right there was a field hospital. They operated on the grand piano. The piano is still there, and the keys are pink. Pink. They're still pink from the blood stained. The second thing, and I did not know this, but so people come, we were housed in park housing. We were, our neighbors were over 6,600 dead people in a national battlefield. So cemetery, yeah. And so our house was like this side, the road was here, and we were in the perimeter of the cemetery, which was here. And people would come in and they'd say, well, I'd like to see Uncle George. He fought for the Minnesota 2nd. Where is he buried? And so we'd open the book and we'd say, Uncle George is buried across there. Here is his number of the cemetery. It's in row M, blah, 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 blah. And people could walk over and see Uncle George, where great Uncle George had fought and died. However, if you came in and said, well, my Uncle Alfred fought for the Alabama region. He died here in battle. Where is he buried over there? You know what we'd have to say? He's not there. Because if you were the rebellion, you couldn't be buried in national cemeteries. So every day, people who come down to Stones River or to other cemeteries to find out and to honor the graves of those who fought, who were fighting for the Southern cause in the Southern armies, are not buried in national cemeteries. It is a daily reminder for people. So thinking about that, let's take some questions about what impact, because I think it reverberates today. You may disagree with me, which is fine, because that leads to lively conversation. But think about when you destroy a culture, what that means. And think about how we are so concerned today, which I think is apt with cultures who have been destroyed, Native Americans within this country. But what have we thought about with the South? And one last piece I'll share is knowing what we knew when people came in and we were doing visitor services, we would say to people, because I surely don't sound Southern, right? Okay. We would say to people, did your family suffer occupation and how did that impact stuff? And the stories that we began to hear were amazing stories that we never would have heard if we wouldn't have shifted our way of thinking about this. So questions? A story? Absolutely. One of the question was just asked for everyone to hear. Tell us a story. One of the stories is about the silver. And Grandma's silver was stolen. It was her way of being able to sell the silver so that the next generation could go to college. College was never available then to that family because the means of what they had for financing it had been stolen.
From listening to you and from what I knew, I always thought of the Civil War as fought to free the slaves. But the main purpose was not that, was it?
No, it was
It was
much
to
more
preserve the Union.
preserve the Union and the economic stability. When you realize that slaves were still being held and that how well versed people were about the Constitution back then. You want to respond? Okay, Ann.
Can you just say a little bit about these sheets that you
Sure.
passed out?
Yes, I will absolutely. So this is what the writing that we would often get looks like. And if you don't have a sheet, we've got some extras. But this is what the writing would look like. All of you have it. I'm beginning to know why they call it cursive. And what we would do is that there is a handbook that we actually have about how you correct stuff on there. And then, so we would read these and try to read these. This is a really nice one. I printed a really nice one for you to see what it looked like. But many of them, the spelling was different too. And words like pass, we have to make, if something's spelled wrong, we have to put it in parentheses and mark it sick, S-I-C. And we learned that that often words with two S's were an F and an S. That's an old German and it lasted until probably 1870s, 1880s. That was a common. The backside, and I hope you look at some of it, is the envelopes. So all of you have the same, and it's the envelopes that would come. You have pictures of cannons. You have one of the Southern Confederacy, and so these are really some nice examples of what letters look like, both the front and the back, so you could see what and there's some running around here if you need one. Okay? You want it? Okay.
I have just a question for you in terms of other perspectives that may have appeared in these letters besides fighting the war to save because of the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me that's certainly one perspective and probably was very widespread in terms of why people fought. But there are other perspectives as well. Freeing the slaves, one of them, there were people who were ardent abolitionists who went into the Civil War primarily because they were concerned about slavery, Northern abolitionists. Did you see any letters that talked about that? And That's one question.
Mhm.
But there's also people that would say the Civil War is basically about economics. It was, and slavery is one piece of that, but the South's, involvement in slavery was all about economics, and sort of that's how they made their livelihood. They needed cheap labor or free labor in order to make a go of it in terms of running their plantations, particularly in the deep South, but also in places like Virginia. So I think the whole business of why we were involved in the Civil War is more nuanced than just that they were trying to preserve the Constitution. That's certainly an important piece of it, but it's not all of it.
Yeah, I appreciate the comment. I can tell you that we have done over 150 letters. Done over 150 letters at least in the last 4 years. We have not, and that's why I think we presented, because I had shared a view that was similar to yours. We have not seen one in over 150 some letters, and they don't pre-screen them, they just send it to us, that talked about it being for slavery. Now, there is a strong abolitionist movement, but we have not seen that in the letters. And we have seen, we could, more than willing to share even more, but we have not seen anything but the Constitution. And I was surprised too. But then you also think about the 4 northern states that were allowed to keep slaves as part of their economics. So that's an interesting question.
Thank you so much for coming and sharing your work with us. And it's fascinating to hear these stories. A couple things that struck me, leave me a little sad actually, is how when you, especially the letters that reflected deep racism, and I think of what we've heard from some of our political leaders about the Somali community in Minnesota, the Haitian immigrants in Ohio. Seems like a lot of that is still with us. The other thing struck me when you talked about the letters that talked about destroying everything, destroying the homes, the villages, the schools, the hospitals, everything. Reminded me so much of what's been happening in Gaza, in the West Bank, the wars that just think peace can come from destroying what they regard as evil. Makes me very sad, but thank you. It's important. Your work is important, and it's important to connect, help us connect with what's happening today.
And do you want to make a couple comments, Karen?
No, there's more people that want.
Okay.
Well, I'm very impressed with your volunteer time, and just to follow up on what Don said a little bit and ask a little different question, a couple different questions. What, as you dig into all these letters and come up with some of these impressions, you and your fellow volunteers, does anyone have a plan for what to do with this now? To kind of put it together and pull out some of the themes and perspectives? And then a second follow-up question for all of you who are volunteers, like you and Carol. Are you getting together at all and telling your stories to other people? Because I think this is real important for us to hear about the history and these nuances, of history that we weren't taught.
You want to respond to some of it now? Throw in.
Well, I was so captivated by these stories, by the letters, by the diaries. It's like, holy cow, this is where people were living through. This is, and it's hard to pick yourself up from our so-called easy life and put yourself down in what these soldiers went through, and they were all men, all these soldiers went through for those 4 years. It's quite unbelievable. but that's what war is. And that is one of the most offensive things that has come out of this experience for me, is to read this stuff and to know this was the experience of probably, I think the estimate is 750,000 soldiers between 1861 and 1865. That's 4 years.
Yeah.
And they came from all over the country. Minnesota, we have, primarily that we read from, but they're all over.
I think your question too about, do we get together with any other volunteers? When we were in person, absolutely. Matter of fact, March of 27, we're going to Appomattox. We've never been there before. So we'll be working at Appomattox for a month. We go where they have residential housing. So we usually work a 32 to 36-hour week. And in exchange, we get free housing, and we do visitor services, we do interpretation. To answer your question too, is that when we were there in person, we actually I sent Marty a picture of Carol and I in our full uniforms, because we have to wear full uniforms with little bow ties. And we have gloves on because we actually worked with the original documents. Originally, these battlefields, before they became part of the national park, were under the War Department. And, to raise your question too, is that the accounts of what used to be called Decoration Day, Memorial Day, some of the racism in there about the Negroes from the worst class would come on the trains from Nashville. The racism is not only about them, but the comments about the Southern people. We didn't read them, but my goodness, was there a bias about the Southern people? And I think your question about just to be aware of the impact that had and continues to reverberate today on the South as a Justice Committee issue, it's something we don't think about by and large. And we wouldn't have thought about it also. So that's another piece to put in there.
I was just going to add, you went back to asking about what's going to happen to all of this stuff. I have had this dream that somewhere in the world there is some incredible historian that can take all of these primary sources from all of the battlefields and somehow filter it into a kind of real story, history, not. That's all I need to say.
Just coming up on because these will be on the website. That's why we're making them ADA accessible, so that they'll be on the website for Stones River National Battlefield. I think the other thing too that we didn't, talking about walking through the mud, it's really descriptive of people going through mud and seeing bones and
arms and legs.
And yeah, we were reading one and he said, yeah, there was this battle, it was called Shiloh. And so these are firsthand accounts. And well, knocked Carol's socks off. I still have mine. But I think that it's just, and I think your comment about, the abolitionists and the fight for slavery was a really interesting comment, because that was definitely there. There is a book, I have to remember the name of it, the one about Dixie, about the fall of the House of Dixie, was a really interesting book, because the wealthy landlords would pay people. They'd go up and say, how would you like to take my place fighting? And so those that fought were often from a different class than those who were the owners of the plantations. The other thing, just as a quick aside, is that when we were working, and you asked the question, when we lived with a woman for a short time from Alabama, Miss Linda, who I'm still friends with, and we shared a house together, told me that in Alabama, there was a county that seceded from the state. And there's a book about this because they said if the states could secede from the Union over slavery, or just to secede, yes, that they had the right to secede from the state. And so there was a Jeffersonian Democratic county in Alabama that seceded from Alabama. And there are just these fascinating pieces of history. I think we have time for one or two more questions. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Are most of the letters that you're working with from the north?
Yes. There were very few Confederate letters left.
Oh,
So if you want, there is a woman, there is a book called the one about the Carrington plantation. There is a woman who, The Widow of the South. It's a great book. And she herself, so many people were operated and died there, and there is really no Confederate cemetery. Started a Confederate cemetery, and even though it's fiction, it's very much, and you can actually visit the Carrington plantation.
and I have spent some time in Virginia. I have family there, and they often refer to the Civil War as the war between the states.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you run across any of that?
Oh, yeah. War between the states, the war of northern aggression was a common one.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
We have a friend who is from the South, and that's what he would always talk about is the war of northern aggression.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
any other last question before we?
Maybe just some logistical things, if people wanted to see some of your work, I mean, is this uploaded on the website? How would they go and look at letters? Could you go through and see some of this yourself online?
Sure. I would think, and to answer that twofold, number one, we let Stones River know that we were doing this presentation today, just so that they would be aware that, that there is this interest. And I'm pretty sure that if you went to Stones River National Battlefield, that's their website, that you may be able to find their letters. And if not, I could ask how they found them, how they could find them.
Okay, last question here.
Well, I was just going to comment more about the prejudice. I imagine most of you read the story about Mississippi. My husband and I spent a lot of time in Mississippi because we were golfing fanatics, and we were near the Gulf Coast. It is the Mexican Gulf Coast, not the American Gulf Coast. But anyway, we were in southern Mississippi, and in the news, you'll see a young black man that went to an island with 3 white men, young men, and he didn't come back. And they said, oh, he wanted to stay on the island, but he didn't leave. He didn't keep his cell phone or his keys, and they found him, and he was dead. And, I think I just have to say it's kind of suspicious that he went with 3 young white men, and he's the black man that did not return. And, it's when I heard it or saw it, I said, well, that's Mississippi, which is sad to say. The area we were in was actually more, and it was more mixed. People from, frankly, all over the world and were there, but northern Mississippi was much more, the rich and the sharecroppers and whatever, even when we were still going there.
What I want to say to that is that there's a complexity. And I think one of the ways for me, and probably for both of us, that we begin to see the world as both and, is that you hold that complexity together. And that's what I would encourage people to begin to think about. And it's the work of the Justice Committee too here, that you hold the complexity of issues together. It's so easy in our polarized times to move into a particular way of thinking or way of being. And that what we do as residents here and residents in anywhere in learning is open ourselves to the refraction of many different points of view and know that there's truth within all. And we hold those truths together and we learn together and we discover complexity, which is much harder to deal with than when you're absolutely, I always wanted to get those t-shirts that say, don't bother me with facts when I'm right. So I think that's where I'd like to end that.
And I'd like to say thank you to all of you for coming and listening to us carry on about our passion. So thanks so much.
Well, again, thank you, Carol and Hillary, for coming to share. This has been very enlightening. I think people clearly have enjoyed it, a good turnout. I'm just going to share this afternoon for Justice Wednesday, we have our state representative coming as a candidate to be reelected as our state representative. So Representative Dave Pinto will be here at 4 o'clock. And we have a couple of announcements from our sustainability group to talk about plastic-free July. So they have a couple of events coming up over the next couple of Wednesdays as well.
Thank you. Hard to follow what the two of you gave us today. It's very deep and penetrating and hits me in so many ways. It is hard. But we still go on with Plastic-Free July. You've seen some things, and maybe you've seen that we had for this coming next Wednesday, we invite you to talk about what plastic is doing to our civilization, and there are alternatives to it. So next Wednesday for that, and the following Wednesday, you're invited to come to the theater where we want to show you how you can walk with them through that recycling industry that Eureka is offering to us. The ability to go through and see where does our stuff go and how do they deal with it and what is it good for. So we encourage you to take today's lesson, listen next Wednesday, and the following for Plastic-Free July. Thank you.
There's a display table outside the dining room that has some alternative plastics on, and there's a raffle that you can enter if you want to. I guess you don't even have to pledge to try to avoid plastic, but it'd be nice if you did. But if you put your name in the box, then we'll have a drawing at the end of the month with some prizes.
All right, thank you again, Carol and Hillary. We really, really appreciate it, and enjoy the afternoon.
I just want to say, as someone from the South, that there has been a hesitation in myself when people say, "Where are you from?" I don't really want to say because I don't want to deal with what comes with that. And I just could feel it inside myself as we were hearing, you know. I just want you to know it is still alive. And I try to be positive. Thank you.
Yep.